Welcome, everybody. Welcome to episode number 8 of the Apostate Alliance with your host, John Peterson and Faye Rahman, Faye the Most Gracious. If you're hearing the sound of my voice, you are watching this as a recording on Sunday morning. We're actually here doing this on Saturday night. And our guest tonight is M, or as he's lovingly known in the Twitterverse, Shmeriana Shmande. I just want to mention at the top, please be on this channel next Thursday night at 7 o'clock when the channel owner, Nakasuchi, my brother from another mother, is going to be having the discussion, Did Jesus Exist? So please be here for that. That's next Thursday night, 7 o'clock Eastern time. And I will make mention of that and put notice of it. Make mention of that at the end of the video and put notice of it in the live chat or in the video description. That's what I was trying to say. So as I said, our guest today is M. But first of all, I want to throw it over to Faye. She took part in something today that sounded very interesting to me, and I'd like her to take a few minutes and explain to us what it was she did and what went on in it.
Yeah. This week has been an extremely stressful week for me. I've had to argue back and forth with people that I expected much more from. And today was surprisingly a really exhausting and tiring day, but it was a wonderful day. And I'm going to say a bunch of stuff completely out of context, but I'm going to leave it in that way. I woke up next to a god. I had wine for breakfast. And then I took part in a 4-hour Black Lives Matter march from Parliament Square through London. We did a number of chants. I've posted some pictures. As promised, did not take any videos because I don't think that is why I'm there. I went with one of my friends, Vicky, who her parents were very against her going to this march, so I was chaperoning her essentially. She's 19, she's an adult, but her parents are very protective. We took part in this march. There were a lot of slogans that we were chanting, such as no justice, no peace, silence is violence. We were chanting George Floyd's name and Breonna Taylor's name. And I wholeheartedly support the Black Lives Matter movement because I'm tired of this abuse of power in the system and with police brutality specifically. I see a lot of people within my sphere complaining a lot about looting and rioting without addressing the issues that surround the reasons why these things are happening. And it's really scares me that people are taking that stance, like a very, very conservative stance, instead of actually sympathizing with the cause and standing by it.
Well, and, I've had a few things to say about that because, I can understand why people are violently outraged by this. And make no mistake about it, I don't care how other people characterize it. That police officer straight up murdered George Floyd. Okay, period. Yes. End of discussion. Okay. I mean, I saw somebody put out on social media in print everything that George Floyd was saying in the last minutes of his life. And I'm sorry, no reasonable human being would have left their knee on that man's neck for close to 9 minutes. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And the things that have happened in the past as well. But myself personally, I kind of fall into that camp of, I understand why you're so outraged that, some violent things have happened, some property destruction has happened. I'm totally down with, I totally understand why, like, some of those police stations got looted or, caught on fire and whatever else was done, because this is about an outrage at the police. But like, there's also been some victims of the looting that I don't understand, like just random businesses and, even some African American businesses, and it hasn't just been like big corporate chain businesses. So that leads me to believe that there is a very small contingency of the protesters that are there not because of the protest. They're there for their other ulterior motives. And I'm saying it's a very, very small contingency, because the great majority of the protesters have been, peacefully, demonstrating, and they're not being violent with people. They're not, destroying property. They're doing things like you described that you did today. And I got to tell you, it's just, I think what is needed here is even more people. That's what like the powers that be are going to recognize is, we need something like where there's been marches before in Washington where like 10 million people showed up and shut the whole city down. I mean, that's something that's got to happen, something like that, because our moronic president, he just still is not getting it.
So to talk a little bit about, before we go too far into a lot of different topics, talk a little bit about the smashing of businesses and the looting and the rioting. I've actually made 2 videos dedicated to those topics on my channel. So if you want to go and check them out to understand my full perspective on it, feel free to do that. But for me, the looting and the rioting of small businesses, while I'm not saying it should be overlooked, I am saying that things like that were going to be inevitable, because cretins and thieves are always going to take advantage of a crisis like this.
Yep.
It's historically sound that something like that would happen. And the other thing is that in a political system where people value money the most, we live in a capitalistic society. The way that you hurt and make that society listen is by damaging capital. So it is grounded in some reasoning. I'm not saying that it's what people should be doing, but I am saying that it was just inevitable with what we have.
And Em, do you have anything that you'd like to comment about this, or?
Firstly, I'd like to thank you both, John and Faye, for having me on the Apostate Alliance.
We love you. We had to have you.
We do love you.
That's really sweet. I really appreciate that. Regarding Black Lives Matter, I've tweeted a bit about it. I do think, in principle, I agree that this is the time to fight against police brutality. It has been coming for a while now. It's been, I think, more and more in the limelight, in the public eye, with the rise of social media and technology, where you can record these things. So there isn't just any more sweeping it under the rug. And I won't say I sympathize with the police officer, but I do think that his face is going to be the face on all the posters for police brutality. But that is just one incident in the last, I don't know how many years, that has led us up to this moment. And like you said, like Faye said, the destruction of property is a completely different thing. You can condemn both looting and rioting, and you can support rather the fight against police brutality. I don't think the two are mutually exclusive, and I think people need to recognize that. I do also think that, given in the past, and particularly with people like Colin Kaepernick, who have tried to address the issue with some level of diplomacy, they were publicly demonized by the media. They were called un-American by, I think, the president. And look, it's been coming for a while now. So while you don't condone the violence, you can understand why it's happening. Peaceful protests fall on deaf ears, and this is the result.
Yeah, they fall on deaf ears, and they're mischaracterized more often than not. And, the thing about the Colin Kaepernick thing, too, is that, people say he's un-American, and he's disrespecting the flag and the troops. And I'm sure you probably have, heard this too, but the person that suggested to him that the kneeling would be a very good protest was a Navy SEAL or, maybe another branch, special forces kind of person in the military. When Colin Kaepernick sought out this man's advice, as far as how he could protest in, a non, kind of threatening way, a non-offensive way, this special forces person said, yep, the best thing to do would be to kneel during the national anthem. So it's just, I don't understand why I understand why he got so much blowback for it, because the people that did that were doing it on purpose.
Yeah, and to just add another thing, Faye also addressed that a lot of the people who engage in looting, destruction of property, rioting, are just people with their own agendas. They see an opportunity where they can do certain things without discretion, whether it's African-American businesses, it's still destruction of property, it's still thieving, it's still criminal, and I don't think that's correct at all.
Man, like you said, it's just this small contingency that are taking advantage of the situation. It's I liken it kind of like to the people who go to an area that's been hit by a hurricane or something and sell bottles of water for $50 and flashlights for $100, and take advantage of the situation. Great. So that was today. Faye took part in that, and I have to admit, I have not, taken part in anything like that myself, even though I do support their effort. I live in a little small town, and there's actually been no demonstrating here. And now, before we get to the interview of M, I also want to talk to M, me and Faye both, about how people that are in the LGBT community are treated in Muslim countries, because you may have seen, if you're a person that goes on Twitter, you may have seen a few heinous individuals in the last month or so. There's been this kind of meme kind of thing going around of people base jumping. And the reason that they're doing that, and then they're saying things like, boy, I'd like to teach this person how to base jump, but referring to a gay person, because in some Muslim countries, if you are found out to be gay, they will take you to the top of a skyscraper and throw you off of it. But I want to throw it to M for a few minutes. And if he could, talk for a few minutes about the things that happen to gay folks in Muslim countries, and maybe if you've had any experiences yourself, take it away.
Okay, so this is a fairly broad topic. I'd just like to start and clarify that I think in 13 Islamic countries, Muslim majority countries, being gay is, in the very least, I think, punishable by imprisonment, but they are punishable by death. So I do think that you can't also look at Islam through a humanist lens when laws like this still exist. I don't think that Islam should actually not undergo any criticisms for this. And like you addressed earlier, with the whole meme culture thing, these individuals who do this, they think it's funny. They think it's a joke when people's lives are actually being lost. And recently on Twitter, I basically done the same thing. The guy said something about being gay in an Islamic country, basically mocking people being executed. And I effectively just reversed his same statement in the context of the Israel-Palestine conflict. And I got a lot of flack for that. And it was just to indicate how hypocritical it is when it comes to LGBT rights in Islamic countries and the rights of Muslims being, being transgressed and stuff like that when it happens elsewhere. So there's an incredible double standard. And it's telling that when you interact with trolls on the internet, they think it's a joke. So there's absolutely no seriousness when it comes to this sort of topic. They're so affirmed in their belief that they do not see it as problematic at all.
Well, and that's so true about a lot of people, that they get so entrenched in what they believe in, they don't even hear the points that are being made by people who don't agree with them.
The problem, John, the problem that I think it is that these people who will make these kinds of jokes and hold these kinds of ideas are the same kind of people who don't view LGBT people as people.
Absolutely, yes.
Because I've been in that mindset before, where I just thought that you're gonna have to pardon my language, but I have no better way of phrasing it. I used to think that gay people, people who were attracted to the same sex, were just sex-crazed degenerates. I didn't see them as human beings. So there is some level of othering and dehumanization that goes through a person's mind before they start spewing this stuff. So when you compare something like that to something like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, for them it's like, well, it's not the same thing, because those people are people, whereas LGBT people are not.
Yeah, I actually think you're correct there. I did notice a trend in that when these people approach the topic of LGBT and homosexuality in particular, they almost always reduce it to sex. So that's where it begins, that's where it ends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've always been perplexed by the idea that all these different gods that people believe in have such interest in what people are doing in their bedroom and who they're attracted to. Actually,
and God has always been invasive like that.
Yeah, and well, as a matter of fact, this issue in particular is what drew me to, doing a podcast like this. I mean, the first thing that opened my eyes was meeting Faye and a few of her friends and realizing that, atheists in United States and westernized countries, want to talk about how they get treated by Christians. But the fact of the matter is anything that we suffer because of being an atheist pales in comparison to what Muslim atheists can face in some Muslim countries, and then from there, finding out that atheists can be killed for not believing. And then I found out, the horrible things that can happen to gay people in Muslim countries. And I mean, I can't even begin to explain to you what was going on in my head when I first heard about that that they're just thrown off of buildings. I mean, that just...
I think that to a Westerner who doesn't quite understand something like a capital punishment that severe, it's just unimaginable that that's something that still goes on. And if anyone is still interested in knowing the Sharia sort of ordained punishments for homosexuality, I would like to go into it, because there are two main opinions. I'm not sure where they come from, so feel free to Google it if you want to. But where the throwing the criminal off a high tower or the highest point in a city comes from is actually from the story of Lot. So some scholars have taken that story. We also have one in the Quran. And the punishment that his people underwent was that an angel took the entire nation under his wing and smited them by turning them upside down. So he lifted them up and then threw them back down, and that's how the whole nation was destroyed. So some scholars have said that you're meant to take that example and kill homosexual people in that way if they are found guilty. The other opinion is stoning to death, because that's the punishment for adultery.
Yeah.
Neither option is particularly favorable.
To say the least. Yeah, I just, it just doesn't make sense to me. And I have to admit, early on in my life, I had the same kind of thought process as you, when I believe in God, as far as, I look down on, gay people and boy, what's wrong, from the religious indoctrination. And also kind of, not really apropos of this subject, but I remember a time when I was a Christian and quite a bit more right wing because I was a Christian, and one of my sisters had to make the difficult and horrible decision to have an abortion because she got pregnant at a pretty early age, like I think maybe around 20 or shortly before that. And I remember giving her crap over it because of my religious beliefs and that I was right wing. And that is one of the biggest regrets of my life, that instead of being supportive of the horrible situation she was dealing with, that I gave her shit over it. And that's, that's why, like you were saying, Faye, when you come to the realization that, well, not only can I not believe there's supernatural power anymore, but holy shit, was I an asshole when I believed in that? It's kind of.
And I was an asshole. I was really bad. Not in the sense that I was, but at least in my mind, like the things that I used to think about people were really, really awful.
Hey, and Em, I think you were going to say something. Were you going to let us know that you were a big asshole too when you believed?
Yeah, I was. I would frequent websites to bash Jewish people. You'd hate America for no reason. Big time internalized homophobia.
Conspiracy theory.
And something I want to point out real quick before anybody, gets triggered who's watching this. None of us are sitting here and saying that all people who believe in God are assholes. Okay, we're just admitting.
No. We're just sharing a personal experience.
Right, we're sharing a personal experience and just recognizing the fact that belief in God can turn some people into assholes.
Especially people who like to flaunt their knowledge of their belief in God. Those people can become assholes. If you're like a casual worshiper, you're less likely.
Right. So, hey, it's all about. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh no, I'm done.
Oh, okay. I thought Em wanted to say something. Here,
made my
check
point.
it out. Em is one of us here today. Of course, this is episode 8 of the Apostate Alliance. So we want to talk to Em, and to start with, I'm gonna throw it over to Faye to start interviewing Em about their time as a Muslim and why they made it out of Islam, and we'll have a nice little chat with Em, and I will be gone here for a little while. So Faye, take it away.
Thank you, John. Hi, Em. How you been? I'm so tired. I'm so tired.
I don't blame you. I share that. I've honestly been better. I think I've just had a really bad week, a virtual week. In real life, I'm taking it easy.
Good. I think we all need it. You, myself, Saf, a few others. I think we've done our fair share of bridge burning this week, and I think we need to put it on pause for at least a day, just so we can get over it, because it's really, really difficult to go against an entire community at large, and it's been really tough, especially with this Black Lives Matter thing, because I would have thought unanimously people would agree that police brutality is wrong, but instead we have people making excuses for it or trying to find loopholes.
Exactly.
Constantly talking about the looting without actually addressing the issues that actually matter. Not going to name names and not going to make assumptions, but I'm just telling you how my day went. One fire after another thing.
It's like the ex-Muslim community looking for support for them being killed in Islamic countries, and you have someone turn and say, okay, but more Muslims are being murdered, and suddenly you have to give the time of day to someone else over your struggle.
For me, if you're going to fight for human rights, you can't fight with them selectively. You're in the wrong line of work. And you also can't say, oh, well, that community has done nothing for me, and therefore I'm not going to do anything for them. That's not how this works. Yeah. You're either in or you're out. Like, that's my opinion on it anyway. If you're going to call yourself a human's rights activist, you're going to call yourself a humanist or one of these fancy fucking labels. I don't know. You have to do that impartially. You can't just do it when it benefits you.
Yeah, that's correct. Otherwise, it's selective humanism. In the sense of only what you agree with is what you will stand for.
By definition, selective humanism is bigoted.
In a sense, absolutely. It's not
Yeah,
overtly or explicitly bigoted, but in a sense it is, or at least it
it
seems
is.
like it is.
I'm sticking by it. I think it's bigoted. I think it's a really big problem. And you know, I don't know. People can say what they want. People can question what they want. I'm just all kind. Anyway, that's not why we're here. So Em is a friend of mine, which is why I'm super comfortable, and this is going to be a very easy podcast to do, even though I'm out of my mind tired. I'm running on 2 hours of sleep and 100 Red Bulls. Um, Em, you were from a sect that was very similar to mine. So you were from a Salafi sect, which is much more conservative than a lot of sects. But I have noticed that they are a very loud minority. Um, an extremely loud minority, and they are growing in places like Europe and some parts of the United States. So tell us a little bit about your early upbringing in Islam, and then later your conservatism, and then we'll deep dive into what took you out. But tell us a little bit about your upbringing in conservative Islam and your family
Yeah.
background.
So I I'm the eldest son of the family. We have quite a big
Mhm,
family. Both my parents
mhm,
are Sunni Salafi Muslims. Um,
mhm,
they come from different parts of the country, and each of them still found a way to meet and connect. And as a result, in a predominantly Hanafi community, I think at age 7, I was put into a madrasa.
mhm.
Uh, I was put into an Islamic school as well, but who taught the Hanafi way. But I was put into a
Um,
madrasa, a Salafi madrasa, to almost
would
counteract
you
that.
Would you, for the benefit of the audience, explain what a madrasa is?
So a madrasa is basically a religious school. So it teaches purely Islamic subjects, whether it's Arabic,
Mm.
whether it's Quran, whether it's your etiquette or history. That is the sole purpose for a madrasa or an Islamic school.
All right, continue with your story. Sorry, I just felt that
Okay.
needed clarifying. Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember also when I was much younger, um, not knowing that I was gay, but knowing that I was different. And at
Mm-hmm.
about 7 years old, I recall my dad giving me the talk. Well, not an explicit birds and the bees talk, but
Mm-hmm.
he basically gave me the sense that if a boy likes another boy, then that boy goes
Mm-hmm.
to hell. So from a very young age, the relationship I formed with Allah was that of fear.
Mm-hmm.
That was my first introduction to a God who I learned was forgiving and merciful. But the fear I kept from almost thinking, hey, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to die and I'm going to be tortured for all of eternity. Right. And I think that shaped a lot of my life. Um, More so because the Islam I was almost brought up with was, like you said, it's an authentic Islam. It's also I think we can call it a violent teaching of Islam.
Agreed.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so when when I was in madrasa, I would excel in certain subjects, and I would almost I would be mediocre in things like
Mm-hmm.
hifz, which is memorization of the Quran, and Arabic. And because of that, um, my my dad was a violent man,
Mm-hmm.
and he used to be the enforcer in the house.
Mm-hmm.
So every single thing that he had done to try and get me to learn my madrasa work was reinforce the image I had that Allah was a violent God, was a sadistic God. Of course, I
Yeah.
had no choice but to believe in it. Islam was, it came to me like walking did or talking did because it was instilled at such a young age.
Mm-hmm. You were just living and breathing it at that point. And I think
Yeah,
that a lot of people who are raised with very conservative values in Islam actually feel the same way, where it becomes your life. Everything you do is for Allah, is on behalf of Islam. you're living, walking, breathing the teachings and all of the things that are prescribed for you to do. Um, so so I have two questions that are slightly different in topic. The first thing I wanted to ask you was whether you thought that the this fear of God or fear of Allah was this huge motivator for you to continue believing in Islam, and also, did the initial fear that your father put in you about being gay, how did that affect your relationship with yourself?
Okay, so the first option, that's correct. I used that as a motivation to actually try and become a better Muslim. And over the course of my life, it got to a stage where I had almost accepted my fate, but I still believed. So
Yeah.
that caused a lot of conflict within me. It caused a lot of mental health issues. And it wasn't until the moment I let go of the idea of God on a whole, not just Allah, that I actually let go of the fear of hell. I think regarding the second topic, I may have addressed it in saying that it did result in a lot of mental health issues. Also, going back to my background, I grew up almost alone. I was a precocious kid. I had to grow
Same.
up very fast, and as a result of certain circumstances in my family, as a result of my relationship with my dad, it meant that I had no idea of what love was, and I was also, how can I say this? I was also exposed to sex at a very young age. And over the course of my life, I would confuse that with love. So I would engage in sexual behavior from a very young age. And that continued for most of my life up until my late teens. And I remember after that, I would spend time crying. I would spend time um, trying to pray for forgiveness. It caused a lot of strain in trying to
Yeah.
find love from your God, and love from the human beings who are raising you.
I think that love is one of the few things that Islam doesn't really reinforce. I mean, there's the concept of love is very much in tune with obedience, and if you're not obedient to the people you're meant to be obedient to, then you don't love them. And that is the way that love is translated in the purview of Islam. But if we're going to call it a more anglicized version of love, I don't know. But what I would call unconditional love wasn't something that I experienced until after I left Islam. It wasn't something that I understood. And the first occurrence actually was when my siblings were taken away from me. And I just could not understand why I was so upset about it. Because for the longest time, they were this huge burden on my life. They made my life difficult. They were difficult to raise. They were kids. They were just difficult. And suddenly
Yeah.
they weren't with me anymore. And I was stumped as to why I felt so awful about not having them anymore, even though they made my life hell. Um, and that was the first time that it clicked in my head that, oh, this is something else. And I also understand the idea of connecting sex to love because it does seem to be the only way that, especially when you think about how cut and dry romance is in Islam,
Yeah.
where you just get married to a stranger and you just have a bunch of kids. It does seem like the only way, because like my parents, for example, I don't know if you have the same experience, and feel free to share if you do, but like my parents were never affectionate with each other. Like they never held hands, they never kissed, they never even I would never even really see them hold each other or touch each other, just in a very neutral, friendly kind of way, um, which is which when you kind of introduce that to someone who, has very loving parents and they're very, tactile and affectionate towards each other, does not make any sense.
Yeah.
But maybe you have a different experience. Feel free to share.
Yeah. So my experience is a bit different. In that my parents were affectionate to each other. Not often, but it existed. But more so when you saw that type of behavior, it was meant as shame.
Yeah.
So, every time you see that, it's like, oh, stop doing that, stop doing that, stop doing that, because that's what you associate affection with.
It's a taboo.
So that's it's taboo. So that's how I internalize that.
Interesting. So with your, sorry, I'm at this processing, I'm like buffering in my brain. So you grew up in this very, very conservative family with these conservative values, and you experienced a lot of internal turmoil for what you believed and what you felt about yourself and with God. But what was your sort of first doubt or your first step out of Islam? Because you said that, for example, that you accepted your fate, but you still believed. What do you mean by that? I mean, I know what you mean by that, but what do you mean by that for those who may not know what you mean by that?
Okay, to elaborate, it was at a point in time, I think I was just entering my teenage years, and the conflict between Islam and the conflict between being gay became more apparent to me. And the words that my dad had said had echoed through my head. And due to that being the case, I always knew it was wrong, but I always knew that committing suicide was haram as well. So it got to a stage, like from that moment until I was about 16, when I tried to take my own life, where it just ate away at my mind. Of course, I had researched, I researched homosexuality. I researched what Islam said about it, and I had already made peace that I'm going to die either way. But a point in time in my life came where I felt like taking my life. It doesn't matter. I'm still going to burn. So that is what I meant by essentially normalizing that. And to add another thing is, from when I was much younger, I would also make a point of showering in extremely hot water, almost to normalize the sensation of burning in the hellfire, because that's what I believed. And I had to almost desensitize myself. And you do that, and then you have to still go and pray to this God to forgive you for that. You still have to thank him, and you have to thank him for making you this person. You have to thank him for burning you. So that's what was going through my mind in that time.
It's really relatable for me to think in that way, because I had a very difficult sort of internal talk. Like, it was a constant internal struggle of whether God deserved my love, but because I was brought up in it and I was so invested in it, the immediate answer was always, yeah, of course he does. Of course he deserves your worship. He made you. And I think that for a long time, I accepted his existence, but I was very resentful of it. Like, I never asked for this. I never asked to be born. I never asked to be given these qualities. I never asked for these thoughts or this brain or what I'm thinking. I never asked for all of my struggles and, this life that I have.
It just feels unfair.
It is unfair. It is unfair. And I think that, whenever you bring up this argument of life being unfair, everybody will kind of just dismiss it as, well, yeah, of course it is. Who told you life was going to be fair? And it's just like, but you're missing the point. Like, I don't want to live.
Yeah.
I don't. this is a miserable existence. Like, why would God make me thank him for a life that I don't even want?
Yeah, and it also, in my childhood, it made me extremely violent.
Mm-hmm.
It almost led me down a path of delinquency.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't care much about my schoolwork. I wouldn't care much about looking good. I basically, I just became a ball of anger and misery, and it showed because my parents would always say, "Why are you so grumpy? Lighten up." And from their perspective, it's like, okay, just stop being in a mood all day. And from my perspective, is I am messaging one of my best friends saying, I can't wait to die. That was where I was at when I was 14.
Yeah, yeah. It really does translate into this very, very dangerous negative headspace if it's not um, worked on and drawn out. A lot of my family, through the later years of my internal struggle, had basically given up on me. I had such a poor view of myself and my place in the world that I would, not eat. My body, it got to the point where my body was not accepting food. I wouldn't shower. I wouldn't, take care of myself. It just became a routine for me to get out of bed, take care of everything in the house, and then do nothing else and just become this shadow of a person. And I think that stories like that are very, very underrated because people don't want to talk about it. So I'm really
Yeah,
happy that you're willing to share it here because it's not comfortable to talk about it a lot of the time.
no,
Um,
it's really not.
um, but to continue, what got you out of that headspace? Like, what, in a manner of speaking, what stopped you from killing yourself?
So, well, what happened was I actually got caught doing it.
Hmm.
So while I was busy, someone just, um, stopped me. And
Hmm.
again, you talk about stigmas within Islam regarding mental health and suicide like that. That person
Yeah.
and I have, to this day, and this was when I was 16, we've never had a conversation about what had happened. I don't even know if he told my parents what had happened. And I think from that moment, I became completely depressed. I
Hmm.
was really in a headspace when I was going through the motions.
Hmm.
And I was also still having sex. I was still
Hmm.
searching for that, for that meaning and hating myself for doing that. And during that time also, I became more conscious that I was gay. This time I knew what the label meant. And
This might be a stupid question, but when you say you were having sex, I'm assuming sex with men exclusively or just
oh,
sex?
yeah, so I was just going to explain that. So
Uh,
I was having sex with men, but
yeah.
at the same time, I was also having sex with women to
Hmm.
almost undo that which I was doing that was haram. So I thought
Hmm.
maybe, just maybe, it will be less haram if I had sex with women instead. And
Right.
it got to a point of toxicity where I had no self-awareness.
Hmm.
I had no self-identity. I was
Hmm.
basically a chameleon which I had to blend in to fit into certain scenarios.
Hmm.
And the real trigger came when um, the person who I was with in inverted commas, of course, I was still treating it as quid pro quo. He gave me
Hmm.
something material. I had sex with him. That was a relationship, but to him it
Hmm.
was more. Um,
Right.
so I think this was 2013. It was my final school year, and his
Hmm.
dad had just died of cancer, and he basically needed an emotional crutch. He basically
Hmm.
needed a sounding board, and
Hmm.
I effectively ended the relationship. And the trigger for me going into Islam again was him telling me, "I hope you rot in hell." So that on when I was in that headspace, I had
Hmm.
worked to get to get to a stage where I was comfortable with the thought of hell. Right, I was already burning my skin every day, and that statement just brought the pain back. And that's when I decided to take essentially a deeper dive into what Islam says about LGBT. That was, I think that lasted for about 6 months. I went to a foundation called the Inner Circle. They an LGBT Muslim group, or were, and I would regularly chat to one of their counselors, and the feedback I got didn't align with my teachings. So my Salafi Muslim teachings were very explicit in what it said. Yeah, the story of Lut alayhi salam, or Lot. It was very explicit, and these folks were essentially misinterpreting it. I think we can call it that. They were reinterpreting it to fit
I would
their
say that
own
they were reinterpreting it, or like creating their own interpretation, which everyone's free to do, but in the Salafi community, no.
It's oil
sorry,
and water. Yeah, it's oil and water. And like I was pointed to so many resources, to so many interviews, to so many articles, and I went through them vigorously. And I remember at the same time that was going on, we had just started learning evolution in biology class. And while I was busy doing my deep dive, I came across stuff like, the flat Earth, which I wasn't taught. The sun setting in a muddy spring, which I wasn't taught. And I looked at evolution, and I remember having an epiphany one day in school, thinking, wait, how does evolution fit into what Allah says came about, how life came about? And whilst I was almost hanging on to my Muslim identity, trying to reconcile my sexuality and my faith, I was also researching the scientific miracles and what have you in the Quran, from embryology to, like I said, creationism. And that lasted, I think that lasted about 15 months. It was a long time. During that 15 months, I became like the most depressed I had ever been. I was a recluse. I lost track of my hygiene. I didn't do anything that I liked doing. I was in college, so the only thing I focused on was work, but barely. So it got to a stage where I woke up each morning. I went to the college, then I came back and I started researching. And also during this phase, I became more religious because I wanted to, I wanted to get back on track. The threat of hell was all too real, and I needed to try and find a way to the right path. And every time I took a step forward and tried to answer one question, I started asking more questions. So you go to look for answers, but what you find is more questions. And that heightened the conflict a little bit. I used to chastise myself. I used to like physically beat myself. I used to try and suffocate myself. Every time I tried to undermine what Allah has said, I was trying to punish myself for thinking or entertaining the thought that, maybe this religion thing is bullshit. And eventually it got to a stage. It is. It's actually difficult speaking about it. But yeah, eventually.
Feel free to not share what you don't feel comfortable. But
yeah, no, it's fine. I'll be fine. And during that stage, I made an extra effort to not try and look for affection, to not indulge myself when it came to sexual intercourse the way I had done throughout my life previously. I really wanted to change as a human being. And every time, like I said, I tried to take a step towards Islam, I got pushed away 10 steps backwards. I beat this drum, like I said, for about 15 months. And in late 2014, I remember messaging one of my friends and telling her, I don't think God is real. I genuinely don't believe that the concept of God is real.
Yeah, I'm just processing all of that. I think that the pain and the struggle that comes from leaving a religion that is so all-encompassing is often underplayed. I think that people are more interested in the arguments and don't really understand the internal, really, really painful transformation it is to come upon that realization that your whole life has been a lie, and every single effort you have made to gain something that doesn't exist is futile, and it counts for nothing, and it was a waste of time, and all of that sacrifice and all of that effort that you put into that thing is all a sunk cost.
I would also just like to add, to clarify that during all of that, my emotional ties were still to Islam. It was still to Allah, despite what it said about people like me. So when I say that I also became an atheist before I became an ex-Muslim, it means that from an intellectual standpoint, that is what undid religion on a whole for me. Because during that time, I also studied other religions. I studied the history of other religions, the history of Islam, and I essentially left because I lost the faith in God, not because I was emotionally traumatized and just really needed to run away.
So I wanted to ask, so during this transition period, was it like a clean break, or did you end up questioning the idea that you were questioning your faith? I mean, did you start to see the curtain fall and stop believing, but at times did you go back and did you try and pray about whether you were thinking the right way, or was it just like a clean break?
So from that moment, and I think the weeks leading up to that, I sort of just lost a lot of my religiosity. Of course, I still lived in a Muslim household, so I needed to practice it. But it wasn't authentic. I hated every time I needed to go to the mosque because I felt deceived. And I think 6 months down the line, there was a space of 3 weeks or so when I just felt the need to become more religious, because I was working in a place with a lot of Muslim people and I was almost dragged back in. But that was the last time I effectively prayed sincerely. If that answers your question.
Oh yeah, it does, absolutely.
Did you ever feel like you were cursed? Like, even though you had left the religion, did you ever feel like it was your fault? Like there was something wrong with you?
I don't think after I left. I think while I was busy questioning, I felt a very large part guilty for doing so. I kept thinking that, Iqra means read, or learn, and I wanted to do that. But at the same time, using the critical thought that Allah had given me, I'd arrived at a different conclusion. And I thought, this is my fault, this is my fault, this is my fault. And that's what went through my head, which is why I used to try and scratch myself until I was bleeding. I would try and suffocate myself to almost teach myself a lesson, like, don't you ever dare crossing that line. There were times where I'd actually punch myself in the face, as ridiculous and sad as that may sound. That was my reality. So that is how I internalized that guilt for having questioned the religion.
Yeah, I think after I left, I still had this bizarre dichotomy of, life has no meaning. I still kind of hold I still kind of hold to that. I do it in a more productive way now, but back then it was very much like I used to treat my life very, very recklessly after I left because I just thought, like, what's the point? I'm gonna go to hell, and that was my whole thing.
I find that I'd like to add a note on that. It's funny that almost when you at first lose the belief in God, you still have ties to the belief in the afterlife, in heaven and hell. You still, it's irrational, but
well, and I got to tell you, I am flabbergasted at like how many people I know that once they stop, and this doesn't happen to everybody, but a lot of people that stop believing, they end up having like this mortality fixation. And myself, I went through that, and it's so interesting. You know, like what you had said a few moments ago, and you know what Faye was just saying about how you're no longer a believer, but you're still having anxiety about going to hell. That's such a headspace to be in. That
I think it's pretty normal to have a mortality crisis after you leave faith because you don't have to think about that as much when you believe in it because it's very solid. You know, you disobey, you're going to burn in hell, and if you obey, then you have a chance to go to heaven. Although the Islamic God is very picky about who he lets into happy fun time afterlife.
Well, you say that he's picky. There is a contingency of Christians that believe, based on things in Revelations, that only 144,000 Christians will actually go to heaven. But at any rate,
that's something that I also.
Good luck. Good luck. May the odds be in your favor.
That's something that I realized that the whole concept of God was just it was completely ridiculous. It didn't fit in what I knew from a critical and intellectual standpoint at all. So that I think that also studying Christianity and other religions just undid a lot of the fear I had for God.
Yeah. So that was quite a few years ago. How are you faring now after, you know, sort of sitting with the uncomfortability of the initial uncomfortability of leaving faith? How are you sitting with it now? I understand that you still live with your Muslim family. How is the relationship with them? I know, again, it's more for the audience. You know, how much do they know? Like, what's the deal? Give us the tea.
That's the tea. So I think at the end of the year, it's going to be 6 years since I've left. Ever since then, I've told, I'd say, majority of my close friends and family who I have a good relationship with, and I think for the most part, they have all accepted me. And I'm not saying tolerate, I'm saying accepted me. So nothing has changed regarding both my sexuality and my apostasy. I have also come out to my sister, which is nice. It's nice to have that, but not to my parents as yet, because I do think there will be some repercussions. I don't think it will be violent. I do think the likelihood is that I will be disowned, but I'm a lot more comfortable with my choice than I was initially. I also went through a really aggressive anti-theist phase, I'd say for 2 years after I left. I wanted to eradicate it. Yeah,
I think we all do.
When you say you're not out to your parents, do you mean as an apostate, or you're not out to your parents as gay?
As both. When I say that, I phrase it like that because when I say one, it usually leads to the other. So when I say, hey, I'm gay, it usually leads to, and I'm also not a Muslim, which is why I group it together. But
and often when you say you're an ex-Muslim, a lot of people assume you're gay.
Or a Zionist. You're gay or a Zionist.
One or the other, it doesn't really go any other way. I do want to ask one final question before John jumps in and he asks any questions that John has. I wanted to ask that I know you've kind of moved away from Twitter. Whether or not you come back is a discussion in and of itself, and I'm not. It's completely up to you. I don't want to skew whatever thoughts you have on it. But I do want to ask, because for a while you did have this account and you were in some form, ascribing to the label, the ex-Muslim label, and you were helping with the activism effort. What made you want to talk about it and, share your struggle or share whatever information you had? And
Okay.
if you want to talk about it, what made you sort of depart from that also?
So I think to just pinpoint a time, I do think it was around last year with the Christchurch massacre, because it opened up another world. There were a lot of people addressing it. When I initially left the religion, I wanted to get as far away from it as possible. I obviously wanted to help people, but I needed to help myself first, and I just had to repair myself. And I think that was a trigger in the sense that we are already an oppressed group. I think around 2 years prior, I first found the ex-Muslim community. Like I said, I was an atheist before I was an ex-Muslim. And I realized how important having a sense of community was for ex-Muslims. And that also, it led me to want to get involved in activism, because I look at myself, and in the aftermath of that, reading some of the stories online, I realized that I come from a place of privilege, in that, like we started the conversation with, I am, I think, highly unlikely to be executed for being gay, whereas someone who is in an Islamic country is more likely to do so. And just knowing how much pain I had to go through, I felt like being a part of the community, being able to help people relate, just generally wanting to help others. That is why I stepped into activism. And okay, you said with regards to leaving,
yeah,
this is a frustrating one. It's just that, like the point we brought about selective humanism, I've seen a lot of whataboutism come out during this Black Lives Matter thing, and I mock the all lives matter. That's a completely different story, but I wish people acted like it. And the thing is, knowing what it feels like to be oppressed, you'd think us would behave in a more appropriate manner when it comes to dealing with oppression in general. And I do feel a combination of multiple death threats in the last week, and just I think reaching the end of the leash with regards to people who are trying to minimize pain, because we don't like it when that's done to us. And we preach acceptance, tolerance, unity, critical thinking. But when you have your own agenda, it goes out of the window. And I realized that you can't control how people think, but when it affects your mental health, you can control how you want to deal with it. And I felt leaving was appropriate.
I'd like to point something out too to anybody that's listening right now that is an ex-Muslim. As we've appealed on many of these broadcasts, if you are an ex-Muslim and you want to come on to the Apostate Alliance, please reach out to me or Faye through DMs on Twitter, or just tweet right at us. As you've noticed, M is not on camera today, and if you are an ex-Muslim that feels as if it might cause you problems to be on camera, we don't require you to be on camera. And we can also point you to different apps that you can download that would modulate your voice if you're fearful of people recognizing your voice. I don't want to embarrass M, but I have to say it is a shame that he was not able to be on camera today, because now when you interact with someone on social media who you haven't met, you get this idea in your mind of what they might be like, And when he showed up for the stream today, before we started going live, we were all sitting here talking with one another, and all of us were on camera. And I got to tell you, M is one handsome devil. Okay, so
he is really beautiful.
Yeah. If he had been
He's very beautiful.
Yeah, if he had been on camera for this, he would have been breaking hearts all over the place. So that's another good reason for him to
everywhere.
So,
thank you.
All the women in South Africa would be crying in the streets.
Yeah.
I've had my fair share of crying. No, thank you.
So, I did want to ask you too, so you talk about mental health issues, and myself, I suffer from anxiety and have my whole life, and some other issues, and I just wanted to ask you. So now that you have put Islam behind you, do you have like a newer sense of peace? Is your anxiety lessened? I mean, do you feel a lot happier now that you've put that belief behind you?
I do think ridding myself of the guilt, of the shame, which made me hate most of my experiences, just completely re-looking at that gave me a lot of peace. Even when I look back at my past, I'm allowed to deal with things that I had previously experienced with in a lot more level-headed way. I do think I'm a lot happier. I won't also trade my journey for the world. It's taught me a lot about myself. It's taught me a lot about how I need to interact with people for the sake of being a good person, not for the sake of trying to go to heaven. In that sense, it's given me a greater sense of purpose than religion ever did. And obviously, with mental health, you still carry that stuff from childhood. So as a result, I do suffer from anxiety. It's getting worse in lockdown, but hopefully that ends. But yeah, overall, I'm generally a lot happier, and I'm a lot easier on myself.
That's good. That's good. I'm glad of that. And when it comes to anxiety, you talk about the lockdown. It's kind of the reverse for me, because I'm kind of a person who likes to stay to himself quite a bit. So the lockdown isn't really affecting me all that much. And
to be fair, John, I had told the girl that I went to the protest with, I had told her that in the last 90 days of the lockdown, all of my extroverted energy has been expended on this one march, because it was so good, because I've been to marches before where I feel very, very overwhelmed, but it didn't even hit me that I was surrounded by thousands of people chanting. So this lockdown has definitely had an effect on me.
Yeah, I feel bad because it's not. I'm not going through the same trials and tribulations as most people are, because gosh sakes, I'll tell you what, in the last year or more, I can't even think of a time when I've been more than 2 miles away from where I live. So, something else I wanted to ask you, Em, is, and if you aren't you very close with one of our recent guests and part of the same organization with her?
Yeah, it is Muslim South Africa. Yeah, Hafiza.
And is there anything you'd like to tell us about that organization?
So I think we are fairly new. As of January, I think we are looking for more ways to become a more mainstream organization. Like Hafiza pointed out, that when they started off, they had very few people, and we have seen growth. But I think it's still going to take a while to have public representation. I don't think we have a large ex-Muslim following in the country itself. In terms of globally, we are trying to build a better portfolio. We're trying to find our identity. We already do give support to people. We have a sense of community there, and I appreciate that because I benefited from it But yeah, in terms of what I do, I just, well, not for the last few months because of lockdown, but I do the social media stuff. That's my deal.
And now, when we talk to
you also do social media stuff for me, so I'm very appreciative of that.
It's a pleasure.
Now, when we did have, and boy, I hope I don't say this wrong. When we had Hafiz on, am I saying it? Okay? Yeah. And I don't know if she talked about this during the stream or if it was when we were pre-stream or could have even been on social media. No, it was on the stream because Faye talked to her about this, about how, and of course, Hafiza explained why the change was made. But wasn't there kind of a controversy when you first changed the name of the organization?
There's always going to be a controversy.
Like there's always going to be a controversy.
Nothing can be easy.
Well, and real quick, too, the reason that makes me feel like I want to ask that question too is something you said earlier about how when you transitioned out of Islam, you still felt like a Muslim, So that maybe you even consider yourself Muslim in some way today, so that's why I understand why the name change was made, but I guess some people weren't too happy with, the organization being called Atheist Muslims. I mean, so could you speak to that or?
Yeah. So firstly, I think Atheist Muslim, obviously oil and water, in the sense it has shock value to its name. So people are a lot more, yeah. Pretty much, or fart and thunder. So it's So there's some element of shock value in that people are more interested to find out what it is. So when they see something like Atheist Muslim, they want to ask, why are you? Why are you calling yourselves Atheist Muslim? But then the other side of that is that we still, for a lot of us, we still live in Muslim communities. We still have close ties with our Muslim friends and family, and it's still a massive part of our identity, even if we are atheists. So that doesn't mean we are practicing Muslims. It just means that we still hold that identity.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, Faye, do you have anything more?
No, I don't. I just want to thank M or Shmariana for joining us and for sharing, because there was a lot of parts of that story that I wasn't fully aware of. There was a lot of things that I knew kind of surface level. So I'm very appreciative of you, digging deep and sharing that, because I think that people don't talk about that, and I think that people should.
Yeah. Well, and I got to tell you too, like I am just such a big fan of all of the guests we've had, and they've all, been excellent. But I found this interview to be, particularly poignant, and you really did dig deep and share some things that I think, might be some really great food for thought for other people that are, maybe languishing in the Muslim religion, but having thoughts like you had when you made your transition. So I think it's a very important interview, and I think for future viewers of this, there's going to be some, very interesting and useful things in your story.
I hope that anyone who can look at someone's struggle and try and look for the positives and the lessons can take that and apply that to their own lives. That's the reason why we share stories. That's the reason why we try and inspire other people. I just hope that I can inspire someone by telling my own story.
I'm sure you will.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
And now is the time in the program where we give people an opportunity to shill. Is there anything you want to share with everybody, Faye?
My favorite time of the show.
Yeah.
So, as you know, I've had my social media exit. Look, it's pending. I might come back, I might not. But in the meantime, do support Faye's channel. Like, if you're not doing that, then you need to check yourself, because that's important. It's
Thank
it's
you.
almost as important as white guilt. So
Gosh, no, do not get me started. I'm like sleep deprived high right now. You cannot throw that at me. I'm gonna get so mad. But thank you for saying that. My channel is for about 80 days of the lockdown. We were doing very, very fun, family friendly Christian content on my channel where we were just having some fun. But in the light of the Black Lives Matter movement, I do want to focus a lot of our effort on talking about this. So tomorrow we're going to have an upload that features Saf. We're going to be talking about anti-blackness and racism in the Muslim/ex-Muslim community or South Asian culture. On Monday, I'm going to have a live stream with Sai, who is a feminist that works with Women's Republic. We're going to have her talking about Black Lives Matter and also some of the work that she does. And I also have some other stuff that I'm planning later in the week. I just don't think that right now is the time to laugh. I just can't find the humor in it. I can find small moments, but this glaring issue and this sort of very hard divide that we have within our own community among ex-Muslims is actually quite disgraceful, because the majority seem to think that they can't side with the Black Lives Matter movement for one reason or another. And I'm not going to name names and I'm not going to make assumptions, but it looks really bad, and I just can't support it.
Yeah.
And if you if any of those broadcasts you mentioned, if you already have links for them, please make sure I get them and I'll drop them in the video.
Oh, no, I'm not that organized.
Okay.
I did like 500 things today. I don't know how to organize things like that.
Okay.
But you can hop over to my channel and you can have a browse, have a gander. My content is all over the place. So if you're the kind of person that likes everything, you'll love me, because I do everything. But
there's even
thank you, John. Anyway.
Yeah, and there's even a singing performance video on there.
Don't.
You just find it delightful.
There's two, because there's one where I karaoke for like hours of Linkin Park because I love them. You may not have seen that, but it is a delight. I can't rewatch it. I literally just shrivel. And the other is a cover of Miley Cyrus's Unholy, which was my intro for a lot of my videos for a very long time. So I thought I would bring it full circle, because I no longer use that intro. I need to get a new intro. But yeah, thank you, John.
Well,
also, can I just add one last thing?
Oh, yeah.
Please do follow Atheist Muslim South Africa. We
Yes.
are trying to grow. If you are in South Africa and you do and you listen to this podcast, if you listen to the one with Hafiza as well, please do get in touch with us. It's great to have new people on board. It's great to listen to new stories and grow our community. And the handle on Twitter is @EX_Africa. So please do follow if you are not doing so.
And I will make sure
I follow them.
I will make sure that the links that Hafiza shared with us when she joined us, I will put those back in this video description too, so that you can easily find it. Go ahead.
I do want to say that as someone who does follow Ex-Africa, they do have some wonderful posts. I can 100% vouch for them. I'm very selective with the kinds of people that I follow, and I love having them in my feed, so please do go and follow them. I personally recommend them. They're great.
And you can't be that selective. You follow me. But
oh, John, be quiet.
Always the self-effacer I am. And so as far as what I've gone on, of course, we'll be right back here again next Sunday for another episode of the Apostate Alliance. I will be reaching out to several folks here in the next couple days to set the next month of cast, as far as guests. So any of you ex-Muslims that I know and you know me, be looking in your DMs, because I'll be reaching out to folks to set the next several episodes up for guests. As far as what we got going on here on the Rage, tomorrow, at 7:00 Eastern Time PM. We are going to be doing a stream. One of our guests will be Dragnot Silvas, and we're going to be talking about the current situation of the protests and what the repercussions of that are, and what the best thing to come out of this would be, and stuff of that nature. And then, as I mentioned earlier, next Thursday on this channel at 7 p.m. Eastern, Nakasuchi is going to have a panel on and talk about the question, did Jesus exist? And so be here for that, and be looking for the advertising on that to pop out on Twitter sometime next week. Now, I want to thank Em for joining us. Like I said, I enjoy all our interviews, but I particularly, enjoyed speaking with you. And I hope that sometime in the future we can have you back on, maybe as a guest interviewer or something of that nature.
Hopefully with my face.
Oh, well, yeah, that would be lovely. And boy, I'll tell you
John,
what.
Em and I are on the same level. Like we share a very special connection. So he would make an absolutely fantastic host.
Oh, yeah, I can believe that for sure. And then, and the other thing is too, is if he decides to be on camera, the comment section going to blow up, man. I'm telling you right now.
Oh yeah, you'll get all the followers that I am not getting, you guys.
So, all right, just remember, folks, thank you so much for joining us. And just remember that the Apostate Alliance is where you can be free to not believe.